For me, that is what's really, really magical about Zurbarán, that whether you're looking at an altarpiece that's 4.5 meters tall or a still life that's small enough to hold in the hand, you get this incredible attention to detail, to the description of everyday things. So honestly, standing in front of this painting, I know we're meant to be blown away by the gold and the embroidery and the richness of the fabrics, and it's true, you are, but for me, every time it's the bread rolls. I mean, they are so perfectly crisp and crusty, you know, sitting there with this incredible attention to detail, the light, the shadow, the different sort of textures. It's completely magical to me that we get these paintings, you know, some of them hugely grand religious stories, but they have this extraordinary sort of still life detail to them, and that to me really feels like something that marks Zurbarán out, that it's very sort of unique to his practice at this moment. Hello and welcome to the Conservation Studio at the National Gallery. My name is Francesca Whitlum-Cooper. I'm the curator of later Italian, Spanish and French paintings here at the gallery, and I'm with my colleague.
And I'm Daniel Sobrino Ralston. I'm the CEH Associate Curator of Spanish Paintings here at the gallery. Francisco de Zurbarán is, along with Murillo and Velázquez, one of the great painters of 17th century Spain. And like them, he's really closely associated with the city of Seville. But he's born in a town a bit north of there, a small town in Extremadura called Fuente de Cantos. He trains early on with a local painter, and then his father, who's a cloth merchant, sends him on to Seville in 1614 for official training with this artist we don't know that much about, Pedro Diaz de Villanueva. And in that apprenticeship, Zurbarán trains as a painter, and also as part of that training as a gilder and sculptor, so he learns his craft.
We are so delighted to be talking today about these incredible paintings by Francisco de Zurbarán. We are thrilled to be talking about them, not least because they've just had the most amazing conservation treatment here at the gallery. We're thrilled also because they're going to be featuring in our Zurbarán exhibition, which will be on in the Sainsbury Wing between May and August 2026.
These are the first paintings by Zurbarán to arrive in Britain, and they've ended up in County Durham in Auckland Palace. And to tell some of that story, we have our colleagues from the Spanish gallery, Clare and Morlin Ellis.
First evidence of these paintings in this country is in the collection of Sir William Chapman. Chapman was a director of the South Sea Company, and the famous South Sea bubble, when it eventually burst, meant that his assets were put up for sale. The pictures are inventoried and catalogued at a sale in 1723, and they were sold to various people.
The series was acquired by Bishop Richard Trevor, Bishop of Durham, in 1756 at auction. And he intended them for his new dining room at Auckland Palace, the long dining room. This is his state dining room, the place where he would entertain influential guests, and he wanted something that would make a statement. And these paintings certainly did make a statement. The purchase was in the context of the Jewish Naturalisation Act having been repealed by Parliament. This act would have given Jews living in England the right to become a citizen without converting to Christianity, but it was wildly unpopular, with violent bursts of anti-Semitism on the streets. And within a matter of months, the bill was repealed. Now, Bishop Trevor had been, as part of the Lord's Spiritual and the House of Lords, one of the supporters of this bill, and he used these paintings with the ancient tribes of Israel as a statement for the need for social and religious tolerance in this country. So this series of Jacob and his 12 sons is possibly the most important series by Zurbarán in this country, and we're really delighted that these paintings will be on display at the Zurbarán exhibition in 2026.
My name is Valeriia Kravchenko. I'm Patrick Lindsay Conservation Fellow here at the National Gallery, and we are currently in Conservation Studio 2, where I'm working on Joseph. This painting came to the gallery for a full treatment. At this stage, I would say it's just mid-retouching stage, and before that I removed quite a lot of old varnish, which caused a lot of discoloration, and you couldn't really see true colors of the painting beforehand. So after varnish removal, we also encountered quite a lot of overpaint in the sky. Now we uncovered as much of original paint as we could. At this stage, I'm just retouching. You can still see like bits of over-cleaning, like in this bit, for example, where they probably used quite a harsh chemicals, and now we just need to do a bit of reconstruction on these bits. There is a bit damage on the canvas on the top of his turban. It needed just some structural treatment because it had quite a lot of distortion in canvas and it wasn't in plane. With our structural treatment, we just achieved that, and I also did some additional texturing to mimic the surface, so we wouldn't see that there was like an actual loss. As you can see in this bit of the painting, we have a bit of change, which called pentimenti. So it's probably artist was changing his composition during his work. I think it was also covered in quite a lot of overpaint, and when we uncovered it, so now it looks quite different because it aged a bit differently from the other parts, which wasn't overpainted as much. So now we have all this example of changes, like for example here, and also he changed the position of the finger and a bit of the cloak as well. So it's just a good evidence that it's not a copy really, because you can see as artist was working through the composition and changing it gradually. So it's actually a very good sign to have pentimenti on the painting. I will just turn them down, all these pentimenti, so they're just not as distracting, but they still should be visible because it's still part of original work and we want to preserve it, but we just don't want it to ruin like overall perception of the painting.
I'm standing in front of Asher, a painting from Francisco de Zurbaran's series Jacob and his 12 Sons. Some of the pigments in this painting have discoloured. For example, the sky contains a pigment called smalt, which initially would have been a much brighter blue, but over time this has faded. At this stage in the treatment, the painting's been cleaned, it's been structurally stabilised, and we're at a progressed stage in the restoration.
The subject for these pictures comes from the Old Testament and the figure of Jacob, who has 12 sons by 4 different women, and the sons become known as the forerunners, the progenitors of Israel. The 12 tribes are thought to have then dispersed around the world, and that's the significance that they really pick up during Zurbarán's lifetime in his particular circumstances, because this is a moment in which the Spanish are traveling to Central and Southern America. They are on very explicitly kind of colonizing and evangelizing missions there, and they're encountering indigenous Americans who some people believe are descendants from some of these tribes, the so-called lost tribes of Israel. I don't think you can really understate the importance of the American market for Zurbarán's paintings. He's, spending most of his career living in Seville. It's enormously wealthy in the 17th century, and it's really the gateway to the Americas. So the city has a monopoly on trade with and travel to the Americas during Zurbarán's lifetime. In the 1640s and 1650s, he sends something like 120 paintings from Seville to these new markets in the Americas. Now, we know that he employs a very large workshop, he employs lots and lots of assistants to help him on these grand commissions. What that means is that it's Zurbarán's style that becomes the kind of de facto image making that people see in these new kind of Christian communities in Central and Southern America. He's the artist to which the subsequent generations of painters in Latin America, in Central America, will be looking to. And so he has this kind of very particular role that's quite different from his contemporaries, I think, just in terms of how much he dominates that American market.
A lot of the materials and visual aspects of this series do link to that transatlantic trade. The purple lake, which is somewhat degraded in this painting, was made with cochineal beetles, which are native to Central and South America.
Red lake pigment is quite a volatile pigment and it fades quite quickly. In this bit, it would have been much more reddish purple, I would say. Because the red lake had faded, we have much higher contrast than he was intended at first. All these pigment changes actually change our relationship between colors in the painting.
I think there's a whole host of things going on in Zurbarán's paintings that feel very unique to him, very, very particular. One, and for me, I think one of the most important, is that early training that he has as a sculptor. So right from the beginning of his career, we see this incredible understanding of form and volume in Zurbarán's paintings. He's really painting these figures as if they could be sculptures. We have very, very strong dramatic lighting, which again, I think plays into that heightened sense of presence that we get with his paintings, and also his incredible way of describing the world, so describing fabric, describing, I mean, you can't stand in front of this painting and not think about these extraordinary bread rolls or the basket that we see here, describing the stuff of his paintings in a way that is so close to nature that feels really kind of living, vibrant and exciting. You can see that Zurbarán's spending an enormous amount of time on the costumes, on creating this sense of opulence, and maybe even more so in Joseph.
Well, and similarly in Joseph, who's sort of the leader of this sort of group, in that he is represented in the most regal and most opulent clothing. Again, sort of the wonderful attention to the gold, the sort of threads here that dangle, and even some of these that hang almost a little loosely as if they've been worn and used. Zurbarán, in these works, but also in general in his oeuvre, looks very, very closely at representing fabrics.
These paintings will hang in our Zurbarán exhibition, which runs between May and August 2026 in the Sainsbury Ring here at the National Gallery. We are incredibly excited to be showing this exhibition, not least because it's the first major monographic show dedicated to Zurbarán in Britain, and it is, in that sense, very, very long overdue. If you're interested in learning more about art history, you can click here or here and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.